Jesus, she talked.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the school board meeting to order at 7:01. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Jack Sapia.
Here.
Don Woodworth.
Here.
Amy Newton.
Here.
Shauna Manthorn.
Here.
Mark Sherwood.
Here.
Kim McCormick.
Here.
Bree Woodworth. Yes. And Paula King.
And Savage will be here in just a few minutes. She's running a few minutes late. Everyone can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Next, if we can look at the minutes from last meeting, we do not have any non-public at this time.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the page 2,
Okay.
When Dr. Farah is speaking, and it said that she suggests the CIP needs to be struck against the construction committee is doing. That didn't make sense to me. I was just wondering if that's
Where are you looking at again? Page 2?
Page 2 of 9.
page 3 of 9.
3 of 9, and we're at?
And the largest paragraph in the middle.
Okay.
Third sentence. She suggests the CIP needs to be scrubbed against what the construction committee is doing.
Should it be aligned, maybe?
I think that's a better
Yeah, I
description of what
She
she
did say
meant.
scrubbed, but
She-
yeah, aligned.
Mhm.
Oh. Okay. Never mind.
Mean the same thing.
It's confusing.
Yeah, you are right, Mark. She did say scrub, but I think she was in the term, it was aligned more than anything.
And then just on committee reports, strategic planning committee meets, I think that was meant to be maybe not November 16th, but January 18th. Yeah, January 18th.
So on page 8, under committee reports, yours, it says strategic planning committee will meet on November 16th, and you need it to say
January 18th.
January 18th. Okay.
January 18th.
Yes, ma'am. Did you have any other corrections that you saw? Just the meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes so amended.
Motion to approve the minutes as amended. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Shauna. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? And abstained.
I'm abstaining since I didn't hear the amendment.
We do not have any staff and family share, so the next is delegates individuals and Mr. Brian Boyle. Come on down.
Thank you, good evening. Came in, I guess, and follow up on my conversation with the board a couple weeks ago regarding the default budget. We've had the pleasure or whatever of sitting on that side of the table in 6 of these budget seasons. And the default budget is, every other year, has been a hot topic. It looks like this year it's gonna fall into one of those years. So that being said, my personal concerns that, and I recognize I'm a citizen, this default budget is 100% the Timberlane School Board's budget. So I just wanted to try to pass on my concerns and experience and hopefully have people at least hear me out. What I have is actually my handout from last year. I'm pretty sad that I actually still have that, but I do. So this board, next week, when you sit in front of the general public, you're gonna have some version of this. And someone on the board will be running and presenting the default budget. In this particular page, it's pretty much spells out RSA 40:13, which is the default budget law. a couple of concerns I have. It talks about how the default budget is supposed to, out of the formula, you're supposed to reduce by one-time expenditures contained in the operating budget. Next sentence says, for the purpose of this paragraph, one-time expenditures shall be appropriations not likely to recur in the succeeding budget. Here is where some people are, I hate to use these words, struggling with what this means. Appropriations is another word, you look in your law dictionaries there, for expenditures. It's, if you look at when you fund the Timberlane School District, most of the money comes from the operating budget. Over the past few years, what the country went through, we got COVID monies and ESSER 1, ESSER 2, the ARPA monies. That has nothing to do with the default budget. This is solely, default budget comes solely from formulas off the operating budget that gets put in front of those. That being said, the district did some major work this year and will continue to do good work from the contract that passed, so that's good, that passed last year. But a couple of things that I feel very strong about is the tennis courts, the Timberlane portion of the track, half the track was paid for by a grant. And those are two big ticket items that there's no question in my mind, those are one-time expenditures that are not likely to recur next year. Therefore, by definition, as I look at it, and I had a brief conversation with your counsel, and I won't tell you that Jim, outside of having a 3-minute conversation with Jim and a nice conversation, appreciate the board chair letting me do that, and having Jim say that those are some good points. Great. I'm not here trying to make good points. I'm here trying to help out here and make sure the proper budget gets put in front of the voters. And very little question in my mind that the one-time expenses, because I guess talking to people over the last few weeks, a lot of people seem to agree there are a lot of things that are one-time expenses, but that's where the agreement seems to stop. There seems to be some kind of confusion that, well, because we didn't plan on doing that, we waited till the end of the year, we transferred some money, then we went back and then we did a tennis court. That money still came out of your budget. You can sit back and call it whatever you want. 100% of that money came from the operating budget. So it should be handled like that. So I hope the board recognizes that. And the other thing that, I'll be honest with you, I don't have firsthand information, but I do think whoever the liaison is this year for the budget committee, I believe at the last budget committee meeting, there was some changes made. And whatever the contracts are, the contractual obligations that are in the operating budget have to match the contractual obligations that are in the default budget. This board, only this board has the authority to create positions and eliminate positions, but it's very important that those contracts match, because theoretically, the two things I mentioned were more about buildings, but theoretically, you could have hired somebody and for 20 or 30,000 for a special purpose last year, and you don't need them again next year. That would be a one-time expense. So I just want to come down here again and just reiterate my concern that I think it's a very important document, the default budget, and it's going to be handled like that, because it's just, like I said, it's been a bit of a controversy in this district every other year, and when I see what I see, I do have a concern this year. And with that being said, I recognize this is delegates, and I appreciate your time. So you got a good night in front of you. So I wish you the best, and so whoever that is, liaison, school board, you just got to make sure that your budget commit, your contracts and your staffing match. So that's all. That should not be a hard task to do, because that's usually part of one of the forms you're going to fill out and sign. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Go to show.
Do we have any other delegates and individuals? That was Bill. I get a motion to move the last 20
So
minutes of delegates and individuals to the end of the meeting. So moved by Kristen. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Shauna. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed and abstained. Okay. Now for student representative.
Hello, everyone. Great to be back this week, this time in 2024. So it's really great. Schools in the district are super excited to begin the 2024 part of the school year. A thank you goes out to the Sandown PTA for the snowman scavenger hunt on the last day, school day of 2023. The entire school worked to put Frosty back together. The fence for the backside of the playground at Sandown Central was installed over the break, and it looks great.
Awesome.
Sandown North's winter concert will be next Wednesday evening at the PAC. Sandown North's yearbook cover contest has ended. There were many great entries, and all the 5th grade students voted on their favorite cover. The winner will be chosen after all votes have been collected and counted. The Danville Elementary custodians worked hard over break to refresh their common areas, leaving the school looking sparkling clean. Danville is looking forward to their winter concert, which will be on Wednesday, January 17th at the PAC, starting at 7. Atkinson Academy's string and chorus concert will be next Tuesday, January 8th at 7 o'clock in the PAC. Pollard is wishing their students, staff, and parents a Happy New Year. Middle school students are looking to finish quarter 2 strong, which ends on January 19th. Students at the middle school are completing their second iReady diagnostic this week, which will inform teachers and administrators on common areas of academic need. A reminder that midterms will be running at the high school from the 16th to the 19th. Dismissals can only be done in between classes, and students must be on time for these exams. The schedule for the exams can be found in student and parent emails. Another reminder that after-school academic support is offered to high school students in the library until 3:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monday, January 22nd, semester 2 will begin at the high school. French Honor Society will be having a bake sale Monday, January 8th, offered to high school students to earn money for those traveling to Quebec City in May this year. And to conclude, there is no school Monday, January 15th, as it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess you need to skedaddle out of here for your math test.
Oh, yeah.
You too. That's right.
Well, you have a good evening and good luck on your exams.
Thank you.
All right.
Night, Armand.
Good night. Next on the list is for our current business, and it's the math curriculum edits. And I believe Sandy's going to speak to this.
Yes, so in your packet, I know there were some questions that came up at the last meeting. First, we'll start with the statistics and probability recommendation that came out of the middle school to remove a competency that they believed was placed there in error, but to retain the unit title. So I know that there were some questions that came up as to why we would not change the unit title if both of those areas of mathematics were not being addressed. So Mr. Pedersen went back, worked with Mrs. Pahopek, our curriculum coordinator, connected with the math teachers to go through and make sure that to trace for you and to give you, so this chart that you're seeing below, they wanted to make sure that you had access to look at our K-12 progression of how our units are titled all the way up from kindergarten going up to 12th grade, and how those units correspond to the strands that appear in the Common Core State Standards, which in New Hampshire are known as the New Hampshire College and Career Readiness Standards. They are the same documents, we just call them something different in New Hampshire. So if you look at this, there are strands that shift once you hit the 5th and 6th grade transition. But looking at statistics and probability, that domain of mathematics begins at the elementary level as measurement and data. Once you hit 6th grade and all the way up through high school, it becomes statistics and probability. So for alignment, our unit titles in mathematics, we can trace back in our elementary documents. You will see titles that are measurement and data. Once you hit the middle school, there are units in each grade level that are statistics and probability. That being said, the teachers are flexible. If it's the will of the board that we remove probability from the unit title, they are fine with that. What's important to them and fundamental is that the competencies that are included in the units are aligned to the standards that are appropriately placed. that are tied to the skills and content that the students are learning and expected to master. So they feel confident in recommending the competency change. The unit title, they are fine either way. However, the rationale for maintaining it is that consistency K-12.
It's quite a chart, thank you.
Thanks
feel
to
like-
Mr. Patterson for putting that together.
Yeah, and I feel like the individuals who are proposing these changes and also why they're staying with the current name domain and everything like that, they're definitely the experts in that field and will defer to what they're suggesting. So I don't see a problem with any of this, and unless somebody else has a question. Someone want to make a motion to approve the,
Make a motion to approve the middle school math curriculum edits
for private stats?
for problem, yeah, do I have to be specific?
There's the second one. I can
Yeah, I
either
would.
address that one now if you want to do a
Why don't you make it specific to the,
Sure.
to the
Yes,
moving,
I'll do
and
the
then we'll talk
statistics and
about
probability.
Okay,
I'll second.
seconded by Kim. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained.
Great. You have a second executive summary relative to the second proposed curriculum change or competency removal for middle school math pertaining to rational numbers and real numbers. So if you remember, there had been two competencies that were almost verbatim the exact same wording, with the difference being rational numbers and real numbers. So the argument that the math department is making is that it makes more sense to keep the competency pertaining to real numbers because rational numbers are a subset of real numbers. And so I know a question came up at the last meeting. Does this mean that they could, in fact, be considered competent in the competency of real numbers, but not be competent with regard to rational? That was brought back to the teachers, and the response was that no, that could not happen. Because, as I said, rational numbers are a subset of real numbers, as are natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, and irrational numbers. So that competency that pertains to real numbers would require them to engage in, show, and demonstrate their skills and learning in all of those areas. The competency is sort of, I like to think of it as an umbrella statement that encapsulates a lot of standards and skills underneath it. So by doing this, they're generalizing it, but that does not mean that those skills are being removed from the curriculum and their instructional practices with students. So just wanted to bring that back for clarity because of the question that came last month. So
Yeah,
I
Jack,
have
go
a
ahead.
question. So obviously this is well thought out and I appreciate all the due diligence, but and it probably doesn't pertain to the motion or changing things, but as it pertains to mathematics, as I see movement in proficiencies nationally, which concern us all, I'm sure, do we have programs in place or some type of system in place to support students that want more work in the math arena?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Yep. We have multiple systems that include programs, but also interventions that are designed with to be delivered at a tier 2 level with certain students should they need catch-up growth, or on the opposite end, to push and challenge students who might be needing more of a challenge, but yes.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for the competency removal? Can I get a
Make a motion to approve the competency removal for middle school still, yes, middle school math. For real numbers and removing rational numbers. Is that correct? That's my understanding. We're keeping real numbers and removing rational numbers.
Correct.
That was a mouthful.
I'm so glad Armand left because he'd be spinning for
I
that
know,
math
right?
customer.
Motion made by Shauna, it was seconded by Bree. Do we have any other discussion on this? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? And abstained. Thank you for that. All right, next on the list is school calendar.
That is also me. So based on conversation at our last meeting, I've brought you a few things for your consideration with regard to next year's school calendar. So some of the questions that came up at the last meeting were with regard to the projected last day of school and the potential for us as a district to have snow days and the potential impact on making up and moving the last day of school, pushing that forward, right? So there are guidelines in the state of New Hampshire connected to RSA around how you count hours per day at each level. And these are state guidelines that we use every year when we're calculating at the end of the year if we are going to make up missed snow days or advocate to shift to an hourly count, which we have done for the past, I think, 5 years, or if not more years. So what I've brought you, these are, this is direct wording from the DOE guidance that was last updated in 2021, I believe. So you'll see there are maximum counts that are, minimum counts by level that are required. And those differ from half-day kindergarten, which is 450 hours, grades 1 through 6, 945, and then 990, 7 through 12. Some of those sub-rules, the ones that are numbered 1 through 6, give you a little bit more clarity on how we do this. So we have taken the time to look at our building schedules at all of our schools and to go through each of these guidelines. So you cannot count lunchtime, homeroom periods, passing time, breaks. So we've removed those. We've calculated how much time at each school that encompasses. You can count advisory as instructional time at the middle and high school. You also can count up to 30 minutes of recess up through grade 6. So we've gone through those calculations with our schedules. What we found is that as a district at all of our schools, on a daily basis, we exceed the maximum number of hours that we can count per diem. So if you go down to numbers 5 and 6, you'll see the language for elementary school is 5.75 hours per day. At the elementary level, we exceed that count. We're just over 6 for elementary students. At the middle and high school, we are roughly around 6.5, but we can only count 6 per day. So we know that beyond these requirements, we're slightly over, not significantly on a daily basis. That being said, a couple other things to call your attention to. Number 4 on this list speaks to graduation date. And so thinking at the high school level, the maximum number of hours you can count per day is 6 hours. So seniors are not supposed to graduate more than 5 days, calendar days, if we were using a calendar day count, or 30 instructional hours prior to their classmates. So that is something to keep in mind with regard to projected graduation. This board for the past several years has had the practice of not determining the graduation date until we get closer to the spring when there's less danger of missing school days. So typically when you adopt a calendar, just past boards have not voted on graduation date, but it's something to be thinking about as you're looking at the calendar. On the reverse side, or the second page of this, you'll see projections for 2 calendars. So in addition to the one that we brought you back in December, I've brought you the original, or I shouldn't say original, but the initial calendar that we had developed after meeting with the other districts that are in our region for career and technical education. So I brought you that as well. That is a calendar that I had looked at with Mr. Broad when we consulted. He shared that as an option with his executive board when they looked at calendar options and settled on the first one that I brought you. So you're seeing 2 draft calendars. Regardless of those start dates and end dates, our hourly counts remain consistent. So as you are looking at the second page of the summary, you'll see the calculations by day. This takes into account for half-day K. Half-days are a full day for half-day K, so they do have 180 calendar days. For all other schools, because of our early release days, they have 173 full days of school, which is 6 hours at the middle high school, 5 3/4 for elementary. And then you'll see the 4-day early release day calculation. I've given you the total hours by level, the minimums required based on the first page of this with the state guidance, and then an estimation of how far in excess we would be from an hourly count, and then using the hourly calculations by level, determining roughly how many days we would have to play with in the calendar that we would either have to make up or not make up if we shifted to hours. So this is information I wanted to bring to you based on the questions that came up. And then you also have both calendars. Also, some information I just wanted to share because I know there were questions that came up about past calendars. As a district, I went back for about the past 12 or 13 years. The last time we as a district started school after Labor Day was during the 2012-2013 school year. Final days of school for since that time ran between the earliest was June 13th, which was this year's projected calendar date, 14-15, and all other days ranged between the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th in 12-13. That was the year we started after Labor Day, so we were a little bit later. So just bringing that for information. I know there was a question about before Labor Day or after. I did share the second draft with Mr. Broad, and we chatted a little bit about both calendars. A couple things just to keep in mind, again, information is there is projected construction at the high school during the summer. We don't know how early that will be done. So looking at the start date of school and professional development for teachers, but also knowing that teachers need to get in and set up their classrooms before we launch the school year. That's a consideration that we discussed. Also, thinking about the semester break at the high school level where they have midterm exams. On the first calendar you looked at, that semester break falls on a Friday ahead of a 3-day weekend with a professional development day on a Monday, semester 2 starting on a Tuesday. The second calendar I brought you brings us into semester 2 starting on, or I should say semester 1 ending, which would be the last day of midterms, the day after Martin Luther King Day, right, which is the 21st, I believe. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe from recollection, that's what it is. So that would just mean for high school students and staff, they would have 3 days of midterms, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before that long weekend, come back on Tuesday, finish exams, launch semester 2 on Wednesday. Something for your consideration, if that's the version that as a board you are leaning toward, we could look at having an imbalance in the number of days per semester, just to have a clean break. We could back up semester 1 to have it end on a Friday. We would have then 89 days in semester 1, 91 in semester 2. Knowing that we get hit with snow days regularly, and it's rare that we have a full 90 days in each semester on either end. So just a few things that we talked about for your consideration, and just wanted to bring you whatever information you might be looking for to make a decision. So,
Jack.
I'd just like to say, after listening to you for the last 15 minutes,
sorry.
no. The breadth and diversity in what you deal with and the passion in which you do it is extremely, extremely admirable. I can't tell you, I've known you for a while and I'm just so impressed. Thank you, because it's just really cool.
There's a lot of math.
Yeah, a lot of math.
Yeah, Bree.
I know that as a board, we also discussed the 2 days returning after winter break, well, Christmas, I guess, break. And was there a reason you didn't play with those while you were adding on the 2 beforehand?
Reason why we didn't do that?
Well, if you were adding 2 for a week, why didn't you take away those 2 to even it out?
Can you be specific about which 2 days?
2nd and 3rd of January.
So to give 2 full weeks of Christmas break.
So primarily when we developed the original one, it was to align with the other districts. And all of them were bringing their students back on that day. So in the spirit of trying to limit the number of days and conflicts, we aligned with the other 4 districts and their vacation schedules.
Salem said.
Salem, and the most recent version I saw, which I believe is final, but I'm not 100% correct. It's the same. They were bringing them back on that same day. Pinkerton is as well, Wyndham is as well, and Pelham.
So that impacts a certain number of our kids who take courses there.
Yes.
Okay, so then we need to pick one of these 2 drafts.
Is there a preference in consultation with the various players?
So not to cut Sandy off, but it looks like between the two drafts, the Christmas break, you're coming back the same day. So the other significance is that with draft one, you come back after Labor Day. No,
No, you
no,
don't.
no, you don't, no, you don't,
No.
no, you don't, sorry, you come
It's-
back the 28th,
It's
29th.
2 days versus 4
Yeah.
days before.
It's flipping the two, you're adding 2 days to have a 4-day week at the beginning and get out of school earlier in June.
Yeah.
That's all, that's the
Yeah,
only
that's it.
difference between the two. So,
From the perspective of staff, draft one, aside from new teachers who come in that third full week of August for teacher induction, which is optional for teachers but strongly recommended, their first contractual day would be the 22nd on that first draft, the NT day, not NTI. That's a contractual day for new staff. All other staff would start during that fourth week. So thinking about building preparation, that's where some of those considerations came into play with moving the start date. But I think to answer your question, Mark, I don't know that there's a specific preference. I think I tried to share with you the factors that influenced how we developed both and advantages, potential disadvantages for both calendars.
I didn't know whether you're purposefully being extraordinarily neutral in your presentation, so.
so from not a staff perspective, from a kid perspective, from kids that I've spoken to, parents I've spoken to, I'm going to support draft two. I said this before. I mean, you're asking people, either way, people are not getting the Labor Day weekend. You're asking them to come back from their summer for 2 days of school and to start then a majority, I won't say majority, but a large portion of our student population at the high school level is already in sports, band, activities, things are starting. You're asking them to come back, they're here, they're ready, there are games on campus, there are things happening. Why would we not, and if we're worried about the school not being ready 2 days before, we're in a bigger problem. I mean, the school it should be ready to go within those 2 days. I would think, we're not talking 2 weeks, that would be something, but 2 days shouldn't be much of an issue. My concern, again, as I've said to you before, is graduation. That's huge. If you go the other calendar, you're potentially talking the kids not graduating until the 14th, other kids getting out of school 2 days later. There's some rite of passage there. And not only that, from another parent perspective and kid perspective, things aren't like they were 10, 15 years ago. Kids come out of school and they're going to this opportunity for this camp or this or that. And the later we get out of school, the less chance kids have to go and do these things. They're less employable for the summer. They can't go to different opportunities. They can't take advantage of things. And I think that becomes a problem. You're also telling parents you might now need to find daycare starting the middle of the week. It's easier to find a camp that's going to start on a Monday. So I just think there are a lot of reasons to that coming back for 2 weeks at the end, 2 days at the end of the summer, and that potential for the graduation to me just sells me on draft two. So
Shauna, and then Bree.
I agree with all of Kristen's points. The only thing that I would say about the draft two is just trying to do that clean break for the semester, just to make it a little bit easier.
That change would be at the bottom of that draft, if that's what you were referencing, in the box, where it talks about end of quarter one, quarter two. We would change January 21st to January 17th.
Great.
Which would give us 89 days in semester one and 91 days in semester two.
can I ask a question for consideration?
Hold on, Bree, and then.
But it's just on that one point.
Oh, okay.
So just
Okay.
why not go to the 22nd? Because that's midterm break for the high school, and then that would give them the opportunity to have 2 days of exams where they're really studying for 2 days of exams and finals, and they kind of have a long weekend for a mental break. Because right now they have the long weekend before their stuff starts anyways. And then they come back for 2 days. Just something to consider if you're going to shift one of those days, maybe having them have
2 and
2 days of exams, a long weekend to kind of decompress and then start studying for the next 2 days. Maybe
That's
get
not
some
a bad
input from the students.
Wish our mom was here. We could ask him.
Yeah. Well, he's studying for exams.
Well, that's what I've just.
I know.
No, it's a good point. No,
I don't
Great.
recall the exact issues regarding that imbalance, but there were some concerns that one year when we did that in terms of the power school alignment, that they didn't take into account, and it impacted some records, the kids' grades and things like that. I wish Ken was here to see if he would recall what that was. Just want to make sure that we would look at any impact, anything that he would have to do up front to make sure that everything, closed out the way it should, and no days were lost in the record keeping.
Great.
Wow.
So my comment would be, if we're so concerned, because again, we're saying, why are we coming back for 2 weeks, but for 2 days? But we're essentially coming back the same week regardless. It's us ending differently is what kind of we're fighting over. And where it is 12 days we have work with here, historically, how many snow days have we had in a year?
Less than 12.
Okay, so can we just take 2 of those days that we have already accounted for and just cut them off at the end of the year?
Not when you were developing the school calendar based on days. So we can't
develop
do
it
that.
based on hours?
It is contracts, right?
So we're required to develop a 180-day calendar. We can shift to hours and calculate hours.
Can we make those 2 professional development days?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can we make those 2 professional development days?
that's a contract.
That's a contract.
Issue.
Why? They can't be back to back, take them out from somewhere else?
They already have them built in.
So
Other
Be
days.
effective.
take them from there. Swap.
Professional development during the year that is connected to what we are working on with teachers is much more impactful during the school year, so they can take what they're learning and apply it in the classroom, as opposed to backloading it at the end of the year after students have left. And we potentially have staff leaving and transitioning during the summer, just something to consider.
I'd just be hesitant to go away from supporting the tech students in their schedule and aligning with other schools in that aspect.
Which I think both of these calendars do.
Don't we start earlier than them now?
We would be starting 2 days earlier.
But everything else aligns.
Everything else aligns. And Wyndham, if I remember, I have it somewhere. Wyndham, that first week, they start the first week that we do. They begin on a Wednesday, but they go on Friday. So that's a conflict with that district.
And we're
But they
allowed-
begin on the 28th and go the 29th and 30th. Pinkerton and Salem are both those first 2 days and are off on Friday as draft 1. If we go back to Monday, we have 2 days in conflict with Salem, Pinkerton, and Wyndham. Friday would be in conflict with Wyndham only.
And we're allowed so many conflicts a year.
We're allowed up to 10.
Which one of these gives us the least conflicts in that schedule? My brain is kind of swimming a little bit.
The first version would have the fewest conflict. If purely from a conflict, it would be the first version would have the fewest.
By how many?
2.
So it's not that big of a.
Yeah. And to Kristen's point, the second one, the seniors are able to graduate earlier, so.
You have 5 days.
For the reasons that Kristen enunciated, I'm in support of option number 2 as well.
Someone want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve draft 2 for the school calendar for the 2024-2025 school year.
A motion to have a second?
Yep.
Seconded by Mark.
I'm sorry. That was around the corner. Sorry.
Yep.
Any other discussion?
I just have one more quick thing to
Yeah, go ahead.
because I think we should look at all aspects. So I understand we are benefiting the seniors, especially in the June side of things. But if we look to the new teachers and the coming back teachers, which outweighs, I feel, the senior, just straight up numbers wise, then we are asking in draft 2 for new teachers to come back the August 14th versus the 20th. That's an entire week of their summer. And for teachers to come back in draft 2 the 21st versus 22-26. So again, the seniors will be gaining it in June and the teachers will be losing it in August.
But it's not just the seniors, it's the entire school district and all the parents and people that go to school that will be benefiting in June because, as I said, kids that want to go get jobs, go off to camps, get enrolled in places, parents that are gonna have to pay for their kids to go to a camp for that full week to hold the spot and their kid's gonna be in school for a couple of days. I mean, there's many factors and this is, I'll get roasted for this, but I'm gonna say it. The teachers are, it's their job, it's the terms of employment, and we have to look at the community as a whole and all different things. We can't just look at one or the other. But I think the bigger impact is on the community to say you're gonna come back for a 2-day week at the end, and you're gonna have this 2-day week on the other end. I mean, we're talking about 2-day weeks as something we don't like, or, we're looking at taking out the January 2nd and 3rd. If we go with option 1, we now have 3 2-day weeks, which we're trying to avoid too. So, I mean, leap year's kind of screwing us all up, but this is kind of like what we've been doing the last few years, and I just think you stick with it. It's worked. I mean, I think the only real shift is that the way the midterms fall really this year, because it's been working for us for the last few years, that it's always been the 4 days of the exams for the most part, but I know we've had the situation where a couple of snow days have bumped 1 or 2 days over across a weekend, so, but, I mean, I agree, there's definite benefits either way, but, I mean, for the teachers, the benefit to have that extra day in the week that works, but I think there's a bigger impact on the community as a whole by not going with draft 2.
You mean draft 1?
By not going with draft 2. I think there's a bigger impact.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
Double negative, gotcha.
Yeah, it took me a second, I was like, wait.
Katie, could I ask one question just for clarity
Yeah.
before you vote? There were 2 different proposals with regard to the semester break in draft 2. I guess I'm asking which of, if you were making a motion for draft 2, or is that something that you would be willing to give the district flexibility, consult with TTA?
100% flexibility,
Yes.
that's your.
I made the
mean,
motion and I felt like you guys
Yeah.
as the professionals could make that determination. Yes.
And when I made the suggestion, my idea
Yeah,
was based on talk to the students, figure out all the factors, figure out what's gonna make the most sense as far as that goes for the kids. And, and the staff as far as scheduling the exams and doing that the right way. I mean, if it's to get them all done the week before and give them the long weekend to relax, great. But if on the flip side, if you shift that one day the other way, you potentially get that extra.
Okay.
So.
So do I need to amend my
No,
motion?
no,
Yeah,
because we-
it should be fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions or discussion for the motion on the table? Alright, there's my first and a second, all those in favor? Opposed and abstained, 2 abstentions. Okay, alright. Policies. We just have, looks like just 2 for a second read. We have JKAA, which is a use of restraints and seclusions, and policy JLCA, physical examinations. Neither has changed for the language for the changes that was voted on for the first read. Does anybody have any questions for these 2 policies?
Make a motion to accept policy JKAA and JLCA for a second read and adoption.
We have a motion of a second, seconded by Jack. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed and abstained. Everybody said. Facility update. Come on down, Carl.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
I didn't hear
I didn't.
Yeah. I might have been. How are you, sir?
I'm living the dream myself.
Living the
I
dream.
am.
Is this anything Maria needs? Maria doesn't need to speak at any of this, does she? Okay. I know she's on Zoom.
Oh, I was, okay.
Go
I
ahead.
would say in lieu of me going through each item line by line, is there any, I'm sure you've got time to peruse this, are there any
Yes.
questions, comments, concerns?
Yep, Bree, go ahead.
What does punch list mean?
So punch list is after you've completed a project, you have time to go through and look at everything and make sure there's nothing that needs to be addressed before the project's completed, so as they've gone around and changed all the lights in the buildings, the teachers are now reporting to the front office any issues they're having with their lights or any wants or changes they need. And they're compiling lists at the front office of every building. And as they finish the lighting project, they're gonna start going around.
And punching them out.
They actually start punching out the items, right? Thank you, sir.
Carl,
Wait.
I'm sorry,
Marvin
I'm
and Jack.
sorry.
You're okay.
Real fast question, for things in the future, page 39, looking at, reviewing the Sandown expansion project from 2008. Have you had any time to dedicate to that, and if so?
I have not had any time to completely dedicate it. I've glanced over it. They had a 2-story addition off the back
Corner,
right
yeah.
side that they were looking at doing. I don't know whatever became of that. That was one of the recommendations.
So you
that they
found that
made.
paperwork?
I
You-
did.
The engineering
It's
paperwork?
nothing. I found some engineering reports, but I found like a 1-page document explaining what they were gonna do up at Sandown North. I haven't found any plans or anything like that.
Do we know who the engineering firm was? Is it-
I do.
Awesome. Okay, talk to you in a couple weeks.
All right, Jack, go ahead.
So on the very first thing, the EEI project says, looking at putting in a separate hot water heater for the kitchen, looking at venting for new boiler. Do we have a cost on those? Are those things that we've determined we're gonna do?
No, we're just looking at it.
Just looking at it, okay,
Trying to figure out what
okay.
we can do.
And then under darkroom renovations, when it says asbestos abatement and flooring, is that just for the darkroom?
Just for the darkroom.
Okay, cause you'd been talking about.
Yep.
Okay.
And the rest of that can't be done until the budget's passed, cause I won't know.
Right,
what
so-
we're gonna be doing.
As it speaks to the tile floors, and we're talking the high school and middle school.
Both.
Oh, okay, so I've reached out and it was brought to my attention that encapsulating the floors would be a more cost-effective and actually do the job that we would like to get done instead of ripping up the floors and abating the asbestos that's in the glue of the tile, right? So have we looked into encapsulating the floors as opposed to the scope of the work, which is, I think you said over $1 million worth of.
So it's gonna be a lot more than that if we do everything in the district. So encapsulation can be done in a few ways. One, you can encapsulate it in carpet, you can encapsulate it in tile again, or you can just encapsulate it in wax every year. I'm trying to get away from the waxing, so it would be putting like a rubber flooring down. The problem with encapsulating it like that is if you ever have to remove that, now you have twice as much stuff to have to be abated. Cause it goes by weight, so once you take the tile out, that tile is now if you put more tile and you pull both tiles up, now you have twice as much weight of
So I
stuff that needs to be abated.
talked to a number of state and federal agencies as well as a few professionals. My mom is a asbestos and lead inspector for the state of Massachusetts, and she said it, and then she gave me the name of a few agencies, and everybody basically had the same opinion. It is much more cost effective to encapsulate, but I do agree with you, if you ever had a problem. But when I look at our buildings and the life expectancy of those buildings versus what the life expectancy of the tiles are, what I would hope that we do is an analysis of if we want to encapsulate, would those tile have a 30-year life expectancy, and how long do we anticipate, say, the middle school being around for another 30 years? All I want to do is get all the right data to make the best informed decisions. I understand you're trying to drive cost out of with the no wax floors, but what is that gonna cost us? Is it 100,000, 200,000 versus 1.5 million? Those are the numbers that I need to understand. I'm just trying to get the information so this board can make the best decision possible.
Jack, the only there was more than just that reason, the asbestos abatement to be done. There's a new thing coming down the line, and you said your mother is a water.
She was.
Oh, well, they've started finding PFOAs in the floor wax that is being used and in the floor stripping process that's being done with the tiles. So we can leave it there and then just have to deal with how we're gonna abate the water every year with the tiles. So some schools have started putting in cisterns that they store all their wastewater from when they're waxing floors, and then having Clean Harbors come in and take that away. There's a whole lot of things that are trying to drive my decision to move away
Right.
from
So
waxing every year.
So what I think is, I think that's a board decision, and if I remember, because I listened to you quite closely when you come in, and you say they think they're, like, is it definitive? Are these things definitive that it's happening, or is it something, you know, there was a conversation on social media about turf, whether something may be carcinogenic or not, and it's kind of like up in the air. Are these things up in the air? And I
It's
honestly
coming-
don't know how we
it's
existed the
coming
last
down.
100 years with all this stuff.
I know. It's
So-
me too, and I don't like how they changed
And I'm not
lead
trying to
levels
be,
in water to, I mean, they changed from 15 to 5, and now they're talking about going down even below to 0 sometime. So we're gonna have to address all
And
those. So there's a lot of things that change all the time. PFOAs are just the most recent thing. They asked us, they recommended that we started testing our water this summer, when our wastewater. I didn't have the means to do it. Some schools did. They are finding the PFOAs in the wastewater, and
what's a PFOA? Can you?
it's a polyfluoro.
It's a contaminant.
That's good enough.
It's a
that-
contaminant.
It's a
and
contaminant that's been showing up in people's wells and water and systems and like that. We've actually have 3 schools that have high PFOA, have PFOA levels. 2 of them are high enough before this year that they needed filtration in them. We've put in filtration at a significant cost, $32,000 for one school. Another school is below the current PFOA levels, but they're talking about lowering the PFOA levels down to even a lower number, which that school would then require only filtration and that too.
So are we, and this is really more informational for myself and hopefully the board, is that because of the waxing of the floors?
We don't know.
We don't know.
Apparently, there was a company around here years ago. There's actually, I've been getting notifications that there's a class action lawsuit that we're part of just because we're a public water system in the state or in this part of the state, so that we're actually part of a class action lawsuit that I don't know much
Yeah.
about.
I just found it interesting that these agencies that I talked to kind of all lean to one solution to the problem. And if the solution, I wanna make sure we do it right. I wanna make sure I've always been the first one to advocate for safety for the kids and the staff. On the other hand, we have to advocate for the most cost effective. Look, if we had nothing else to do but the tile floors, right? I mean, you get where I'm coming from. We're juggling a whole bunch of balls, so that's it.
Obviously, it's not a very straightforward solution. I think if I'm not misunderstanding you, you're asking for investigation to the other 2 avenues, one just the rubberized floor and another tile on top, so that we could do a cost analysis of that to see which made the most sense. I agree these schools aren't going to be here in 30 years, hopefully not. So we're not trying to solve the problem, looking at a 50-year time frame because the building will not be there. I would be in favor of looking at another option as well. The 1.5 million scares me when there might be an option that's a fraction of the cost that would essentially do the same thing. So I would be in favor. I don't maybe make a motion to have you look into the other
Well,
options.
this is just informational, and I get what both of you are saying, but at the same time, yeah, we hope that in 30, 50 years that we don't have these same school buildings, but at the same time, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so if you do it right the first time, and we have these buildings for a long more time, then the contaminants that Carl's talking about, that we're done with it. And we can move on and not have to worry about it and possibly do filtration or do whatever. I think Carl's really just trying to look ahead and know that this is what's coming down the pipe, and this is his recommendation. As a facilities person, this is just information. I think it just stays with us right now. Yep, Shauna.
On this very extensive list, and I like how you thank people that are supporting all the work that's happening in here, so thank you for that in the summary. It's nice for us to know. I see Pollard on here once.
LED lights and that's it. Is everything else going okay at Pollard in terms of facilities stuff?
Oh, no, we have,
I just,
so, and I hate to,
It's all right.
4 years ago, 3 new boilers were installed in that building and there was no real engineering done. This is part of the reason why when I first got here, I put a hold on all HVAC projects until we could get a company like EEI to come in and actually design, engineer, and ensure that we get the proper equipment in. Since that time, we've spent quite a lot of money on these 3 boilers. Last year, we finally thought we figured it out and everything was running fine. This week proved otherwise. We've had some cold rooms. We found out the boilers weren't firing above 100 degrees. We found some, each boiler has 2 chambers in it, 2 modules in it. One module from each boiler was down for certain reasons, whether it be clogged flow, bad igniters. We've gotten that system, that addressed, but I don't know if you remember, we had a power failure a couple weeks ago, which caused us to have some issues. That wasn't actually just a true power failure, it was a phase loss in the town, which sometimes can screw things up, and we think it might have screwed up the programming for the boilers over there, or at least if it wasn't just the program, it was actually the control modules for them. We've had a vendor come out that helped us get them up and running last year. They've informed us that the company that manufactured the boilers are no longer supporting those boilers, even though they're only 4 years old. So that might give us an indication of where things are going. So we might be looking at replacing the controllers for those boilers in the next couple days. So that's going to be a significant things. And I apologize that wasn't in here because
No, it's okay.
because of the fact that it just happened this week.
So you mean when my neighbor tells me his classroom is chilly, he's not lying? Told him I would ask.
He's definitely not lying. There's been some cold days over there.
And I remember that from the tours last year that we talked about those boilers specifically too. So I just figured since I didn't see anything in the
We
update for
thought they were
boilers.
running good, but
I know, I'm sorry. That's why I was like, I'm almost afraid to bring this up, but let's dive deep. Thank you for the update
So
on
that's
that.
pretty much the only issues we have there. There's some HVAC systems over there that are reaching their final stages and need to be replaced. They're on the bigger list, they're on the lease list, but as you know, some things are getting pushed back out of the lease, so
I have heard,
hopefully get them someday.
I have heard people are pretty impressed with the LED lights and how
Yes.
that's all moving, so.
Yep, and we should start seeing energy savings on these things almost immediately. I mean, the next month's pay, lighting bill should come in significantly lower, and hopefully that'll be good.
Great. So more informational from my knowledge. So when is it encumber funds or keep that reserve? What's that pot called?
The undesignated fund balance.
Are you talking the end of the year money or capital improvement money?
Not capital improvement.
So
Unencumbered
unencumbered funds at the end of
Oh,
the year.
you're talking about the fund for the rainy day, like if we have an
Yes.
unexpected thing.
These
happen.
boilers go into that category.
Right.
That's a good question.
That's above my pay grade.
Okay.
Usually we try to, so since I've been here and we've had emergency situations come up such as needing arsenic filtration at one of the schools, we tap into the capital reserve funds and that reduces what we have left for the capital money at the end of the year, but unfortunately, that's how we have to run a business. Now, I don't know what we have for a rainy day trust fund. Lisa?
Did we vote at the last, was it 500,000 for
Yes.
emergency?
And that's
So
what I thought.
If the board approves those funds for that particular usage, Maria can chime in.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I
if-
believe we voted as a district for 500,000.
We did.
Okay, so I don't know if that can be used without a public hearing or whatever, but sometimes things have to move quickly, so.
Ask someone to find that out.
Maybe Maria.
I got a question.
It is very hard to hear when you all talk or when somebody's talking. With the question closed, please.
I am wondering if the rainy day fund could be utilized, the 500,000 that we unencumbered could be utilized for new boilers at Pollard
For repair.
if needed.
I don't think so.
For an emergency, it's an emergency fund, so if there is an emergency that we need the money for, we have to hold a public hearing and we could utilize it for an emergency, but it was labeled as an emergency fund.
Okay, so heat going down
That's
does not
definitely-
quantify an emergency.
That is an emergency.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was just gonna ask. So in the meantime, while this company that made the boils is 4 years old and now they're not making them anymore and we're trying to solve the problem, we have, right, cold classrooms. What are we doing to put heat in those classrooms
So
for
right
now? Cause it does seem
right
like an
now,
emergency with
boilers
the,
running on manual, so they're just running it and we set them at a temperature, so they're running at 180 degrees, so they'll keep the buildings warm for now. We'll see what happens when they come in with the new controllers and we try to replace them, but those controllers are not cheap. I don't know what they're gonna cost, so.
well, and I'm just thinking, the big storms that are coming.
Kids missing school.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. And then lastly, just under possible unencumbered end of year funded projects, I thought we took out solar projects, but I see it listed here. Is that still?
We took it out of the CIP and other.
I thought it just physically wasn't feasible with the.
It wasn't feasible here, but it could be at other schools, like on the roofs at Sandown North or the roofs at Danville.
Okay.
Those sloped roofs are ideal for them, so. I never wanna give up on.
Again, I would
solar.
love to see it. Just had to know.
Well, thank you, Carl. This is a
Thanks,
very
Carl.
extensive list and you and your team are doing good work with trying to keep our buildings running. But I believe you were here for one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's to possibly have us waive policy DJE for your controls contractor, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So
So
you
as you're aware, as you're aware, we're upgrading our controls throughout the buildings so that we can have better control, I can actually show, I was actually looking at the boilers up at Danville right now as we're talking. I can't see Pollard, just to let you know. That's one thing that we need to get fixed. Never have been able to see it, it's not part of our system. So anyway, as we're upgrading these controls, this company's been very ingrained, Control Technologies has been very ingrained in our district since at least 2005, from what I can find as far as paperwork contracts with them and stuff like that. I can tell you their prices are probably gonna go up due to the fact that we have a lot more controls that they're gonna be doing preventive maintenance to every year and stuff like that. Right now, it's around $30,000 a year that we're paying them. $33,325 to be exact. I don't know what it's gonna go up to. The bidding requirement is $50,000. If I'm gonna have to go out to bid, I need to know now and start writing the bid specs, cause the contract's due July 1st, so I'm just trying to get that the ability to waive policy DGE with the bidding process, because they've been so ingrained, they know our buildings, they know everything about our equipment and stuff like that.
And you've not had any problems with this vendor?
No.
Jack?
I have no problem. Well, let's put it this way. I always think it's a great exercise, especially when you're talking this kind of money, to put everything out to bid. Then, based on some of the things that you just brought up, you can always make a recommendation to the board. But I think it's a good way of keeping everybody, and I don't wanna use the word honest, but it keeps everybody on their toes and make sure that everyone stays as competitive as possible. But like with the tractor, if you would come back to us and said, we wanna do this because of this, or some contractor, and it's within the realm of, a decent sum of money and it's competitive, we're not gonna walk away from someone that has great understanding of the buildings for a couple grand. But what happens if it's $20,000-$30,000? So I always like that exercise of putting things out to bid, just to keep everyone
Sharp
true.
pencils.
Yeah, make sure everyone's pencils stay sharp.
Anybody else have any other comments?
I agree with what Jack said there. I think we can make decisions based on a lot of things that are written well here, that if true and the bids are competitively and close, we might make a decision to stay with them for a small amount of money. I wouldn't want to give up the bid process. It might not be a small amount of money.
Just don't know.
Bree?
Besides the proposal bid itself, is there any other extra work that goes into the bid process for this company that they might be unwilling to do for it, or?
It's common practice to.
Well, cause I saw one that had like a mandatory walkthrough or something for like the.
There would definitely be a mandatory walkthrough for anything that I put out, because we have to lay eyes on all the equipment throughout the district.
So they would have to like come do that, but if
I would
we
have to
did
have-
not do the bid process, they wouldn't have to, or they still would?
If I didn't do the bid process, there
If we
wouldn't be a
waited.
need for a walkthrough.
There wouldn't be a walkthrough, okay.
There wouldn't be a need for it, because these are people, they know everything that they'd be looking at.
Yes, Jack?
Yeah, so my understanding on this, the little bit of understanding that I don't have on this, because this isn't my forte, is that there are a very limited amount of companies that actually do this. No, there's a whole bunch.
Johnson Controls, Honeywell,
Okay, so I don't know.
Siemens.
So that
But
probably,
they're gonna wanna put their own equipment in too, and again.
let's follow that
Basic
process and just see where it takes us. And in all likelihood, I think you make some very valid points, so.
I just have one question, Carl, for you. If we make you go through the bid process and we go with another company, then what does that do? For like, what's the run-up time, and do they have to install their own stuff? What does that do for your all's operations?
I don't know.
That would knock them out of the box, wouldn't
They're
That
probably,
unknown-
so basically the company that we're using, the equipment that we're using now is an open source, so anybody can technically work on it. There's other companies out there, basic automating integrating. I can't say it, Basic Automation Integrators is one of them that I've used in the past. They could probably take over the equipment, but again, learning our equipment. If I call them and say, hey, I'm having a problem in middle school ERU5, they might not know where that's. It's just gonna be a big learning curve when we hire a new company to come in here and take over 9 buildings, over 650,000 square feet, over 270 pieces of equipment.
And the unknown of that learning curve, I think, is also one of the reasons the board considered when they did waive this policy at Ken Henderson's request when we were looking for some camera and safety equipment, about having that same organization has a history with us that knows our systems to stay intimately connected to those things to avoid some of those unknowns. I think so that has been something that has been deliberated here before.
Just based off that, I see what everyone is stating about the bid process, for sure, and I think that, we always wanna be fiscally responsible, but the fact that this company has been with the school system since 2005, quite honestly, I say that we should stay with them, but I'm only one person. Mark, go ahead.
What was the annual fee? What are we paying them now?
Right now, it's $33,325, which is actually below the bid price.
Yeah, and
But in event with all the equipment that we're adding, they're probably gonna increase our annual fees and it's an individual contract from the school. So they're probably gonna increase the annual fee, and if it does break that $50,000, I just wanna make sure that I either have this.
Kim?
Can we make the motion to waive policy, but also say up to a certain amount?
Well, a certain amount is $50,000.
Well, up to like, we
55,
would waive
60.
policy. If it was over 50, right? That's the policy we'd be waiving.
What we're doing is if we waive this, then
Sure.
when he gets other
Yeah.
things added and it goes above that, he doesn't still have to go out to bid. That's saying that this company, we've been with this company since 2005. He's asking that no matter what the increase is, that we continue to stay with this company.
But can we cap the increase?
Yeah,
You can,
I think that's.
But then
but
you
that's
have to
the
put it out to bid.
50,000. He's asking not to.
Cause if I have to go out to bid, I wanna start writing the bid specs now, cause it's gonna be a huge undertaking for me, and the walkthrough is gonna take probably multiple days because of the amount of equipment over the 9 buildings, so it's gonna be a very involved bidding process if I have to do this.
And to Justin's point, we did just waive this not too long ago with the school, with the cameras and stuff. So, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know. I say put it out to bid, and the cameras are very different than the system that runs our controls. I mean, it's apples and pears, and I just think it's worth the exercise, and it's kind of what we're here to do. We're here to make sure because of our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we're getting the best value for the district. I mean, to me, this is pretty clean. This is part of the bid process, it's part of something we should be going through with every single thing that we put out there that's a substantial expenditure to make sure that the taxpayers of this district are being treated properly and fairly. And again, we don't know what we don't know. That's why I like exploring, getting data, putting things out to bid, because then no one can point the finger and say, you guys didn't do this.
Yeah,
Paul?
I was gonna say, there was to me, exclusively, well, not exclusively, largely in part, the bidding process is meant to combat partnerships of 16, 17, and 18 years where there might be some comfort there too, for me. And that's why I want to see the bid process. I'm not saying that the absolute best bid is we're gonna win. I guess it might not be. We might be within $7-8 grand, but we're like, no, this is for $7 or $8 grand. This is totally worth it to stay with them. But because we've been with them for so long, in any corporation or organization of this size, that to me is why we do the bidding, is because of those long-term relationships. And you have to keep an eye on that. I think that's our responsibility for that.
I don't think there's a company in the world would expect that you would have a lifetime commitment to them because, that's a.
Life insurance.
Yeah.
I knew you'd come up with that.
Okay.
He's on a roll tonight.
So I think it's unfair to them or anything that they would have to, take a look at it in terms of being competitive and, certainly we're not saying if they're competitive that we wouldn't be appreciative of what they've done, but we'd want to see that. That's just a reassurance once in a while.
All good points, all good discussion, but I believe we've kicked this horse enough, so we need to make a decision. Either we're going to make this motion, or you want them to go out to bid, or if someone wants to cap it, but someone needs to make a decision.
Say, I make a motion to put this out to bid.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
One second.
Second by Paul. Any other discussion? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? And then abstained. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Motion passes by 1.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, annual audit report. Maria.
Yay.
Hi, good night. I just wanted to present the 2023 annual report. Our audit was very successful. We did not have any findings in any of the schools or at the SAU, so the report was free of findings. I just once again want to thank my team and their hard work, and especially Lisa Oliver, which was an integral part of this audit.
Thank you, Maria. You and your team have always done a really good job with the annual audit report, so congratulations with the no findings. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Maria about the audit?
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Maria.
thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Get to feeling better. All right. Default and proposed budget. I'm going to let Justin speak to the default budget since we've had several conversations about this. This board definitely wants to make sure that we get everything right because for our fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. So I'm going to let Justin take it away.
Sure, I'm happy to give Maria a break and I'll have her come back and to kind of talk through the numbers. But we think it's probably a good idea. There's kind of some questions that are in our community, both educationally and within our 4 towns regarding the default budget. So the best thing to do, I think tonight is for me to speak to it a bit. And I think the first thing to do is just to get everybody on the same page with the law. So the default budget is actually defined in statute. It is in Chapter 40:13, Roman numeral 9B. And I'm going to read this because we're looking at the law, language matters. So then we will look through some fact patterns and give some analysis to where the law stands. So this is how the default budget is defined in the RSAs in New Hampshire. The default budget, as used in this subdivision, means the amount of the same appropriations as contained in the operating budget authorized for the previous year, reduced and increased, as the case may be, by debt service, contracts, and other obligations previously incurred or mandated by law, and reduced by one-time expenditures contained in the operating budget and by salaries and benefits of positions that have been eliminated in the proposed budget. For the purposes of this paragraph, one-time expenditures shall be appropriations not likely to recur in the succeeding budget, and eliminated positions shall not include vacant positions under recruitment or positions redefined in the proposed operating budget as determined by the governing body, unless the provisions of RSA 40:14-B are adopted of the local political subdivision. In calculating the default budget amount, the governing body shall follow the statutory formula, which may result in a higher or lower amount than the proposed operating budget. So that's the statute that defines the default budget. The default that you have presented in front of you tonight meets that statute. There are two real critical things to consider that are conversations in our community. One involves the tennis court expenditure from last year, and the other involves the expenditure for resurfacing the track. In applying the fact patterns and doing a legal analysis with our legal counsel, we're confident that both of those expenditures should be included in the default, but for different reasons, and I'll walk you through that rationale right now.
Can I ask a quick, what's a fact? When you say fact?
Fact pattern, the facts of the case. Here we go. Tennis courts. There was no money in the operating budget for that specific purpose. The board saw an opportunity to have a company on campus. There was a matter to be cost effective. And on June 1st, the board voted to enter into a contract to redo the tennis courts. Later in June, the board authorized a line item transfer to move money from one line into another line to be able to meet this expenditure. That line it was taking from moves into the default budget for the next school year. Question number 2 revolves the repurposing or the resurfacing of the track. This is included in default, but again, for a different reason. The track was resurfaced using CIP funds. The CIP line is not only likely to reoccur, it does reoccur year to year from the operating budget to the default budget in this district since 2021, and even most likely before that. So although the resurfacing of the track you can consider as a one-time expense in terms of that specific piece, the CIP line is not a one-time expense. It's a strategic initiative on behalf of the district to make capital improvements over time. And successively year to year, it has rolled fully into the default budget. So answering those two questions also allows us to draw a conclusion around the default and the CIP in general. That all of the CIP funds move into the default budget, and the board throughout the school year votes up or down individual projects that are brought to it to use to access those line items. Those exact projects are not listed in the operating budget and therefore are not excluded from moving into the default. The board could consider moving forward if you wanted to have a different process for CIP. You could ask the district to map all of those projects out in advance. They could all be individual line items in the budget. That's a way to kind of address some of the pieces that you've talked about. I think there are a lot of other challenges and complications that come of that, but I'm here to provide that option should the board consider the move in that direction. Before Maria begins, any questions, any comments, anything that I can further clarify around the default?
Yeah, Jack.
So I agree with the CIP perspective of that. I mean, I understand it because that's a bucket, for lack of a better term, it's a bucket of money to be, I mean, if all of a sudden we were faced with something failed within the district,
Boilers.
right?
Then
You
we
take
need the
that
money to pay for the
from there.
boilers.
So that there are not specific, and this is one of the arguments that kind of I've always made over a certain amount. Certain things should just be warrant articles so we don't run into this confusion, although the tennis courts fall under a different kind of scenario, right? That was from unexpended fund balance, so it's a different case. But I understand that the CIP, I guess, is there historically, have we over time taken one-time expenditures out of the CIP as it pertains to the default budget?
Oh, that's what he was just saying.
So we've
Carried that
never
year
done
to
it,
year.
okay, all right, I just
We
wanted to be
haven't done it in
clear
the
on that.
past, so.
So there's precedence there as.
Been appropriated in the operating budget and it moves into the.
I understand that, so, thank you.
Would you review and repeat for those who are a bit slower than others in the room, the explanation regarding the tennis court?
Sure.
Just, you can say the exact same thing over it, my mind will catch up, I promise.
So really, a couple pieces. The tennis court expenditure was not money that was in the operating budget from the previous year. There was no line for tennis courts. The board had a company, or the district had a company on premises. There was an opportunity to we know we needed to do it long-term. There was an opportunity to do it more cost-effective that way. So the board voted on June 1st to enter in a contract with those companies. There was just some discussion about where those funds would come from at that meeting. Later in June, the board authorized a fund transfer from line to a new line to fund those tennis courts. And that line item that it was taken from moves into the default budget because that line is not a one-time expenditure. It was appropriated and authorized by the voters.
And what line did that come from?
I can do more research and pick exactly those things up.
Well,
It could be multiple, it could have been one. I don't know
Right.
if.
I mean, it's hard to say where that
Yeah, okay, understood.
came from because it could have been a
Ah.
pool of different funds
got it.
that
Just got
were
it.
left
Thank you.
over and dumped
Yep.
into that
His brain
amount.
We can get that information,
No,
but where
I know they're not.
it came from doesn't matter. It's the fact that it came from a line that was already in the operating budget that was appropriated by the voters.
Perfect.
Does anybody have any other questions for Justin before we move on to Maria? And thank you for those explanations.
Thank you,
Thank
that,
you.
thank you, that is confusing, you did a good job. Even I got it.
Maria, it's all you. She can hear us. Can she hear?
Okay. Thank you, Justin, for the explanation of those two items. In front of you, you have the default budget. We have it at 89,835,373. That is 3.2% increase from last year's voted budget. And it's an increase of 2,788,458. The increase is basically the largest part is the salaries for all the CBAs that were voted last year. We have the TCU, the TCW, the Administrators Union, the Admin Assistants Union, and the TSSU, the Para Union. We also have a non-union increase, so it's a total for salaries of 901,172. We have the benefits for FICA, retirement, and that is the total for benefits and salaries. Then we have the teachers' retirement incentive, which is 227,808. We have the insurance increase, which the GMR this year for Health Trust it came at 12.5, but last year we already had it at 10.8. So the default budget has the insurance at 10.8% increase. So the difference between the two, the 10.8 and the 12.5 is what is reflected here, the 195,000. So the big increase that we had last year to the 10.8 is reflected in our default budget, and that's why the increase is only 195, even though the GMR is at 12.5. We have a little increase in the property and liability insurance, and then we have a decrease in the workers' comp insurance. Our transportation increase, which is based on the contractual rates with first student. Then we have the food service increase, which is based on the contract with Whitson's. And then we have the special education increase, which is the contracted services. And then we have the increase in district-wide professional services. This is all the professional service rates that contractor labor that we have district-wide, both academic or maintenance, facilities, cleaning, anything that we have for professional services. Then we have going out the replacement of the facilities vehicle. We have every year we have a vehicle in our budget, so that comes out of the default budget because it's a one-time expense. And then we have all the district-wide equipment and info access fees, or anything that is one-time purchase that comes out of the budget. So that 40,000 is made out of various lines. I have the detail. If anybody wants it, I can email it to them. It actually just came as a request to know a couple of weeks ago, and I provided the information. So the $90,000 in decreases for the info budget is the detail. It's just several lines within the budget. So that's what makes up the default budget. As you can see in the following page, about 70% of the budget is salaries and benefits, and 30% is the operating budget.
Thank you, Maria. Does anybody have any questions about the default budget for Maria?
Maria, can you tell me what line the note 11, the replacement of facilities vehicle, what line did that come out of?
The vehicles,
Yeah,
yeah, I can.
the 50,000.
Is 2657. Give me 1 second. Actually, come over here. Give me 1 second. It's 2650.
I think it's 2650.
It's 265737 on page 12
Okay.
of the report.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
No, it is a problem. I want to go bring her a cup of tea.
I know. Anybody have any other questions about the default budget? That is something we do have to vote on tonight, but before we vote on that, do we want to have Maria talk about the proposed budget? Do we need to?
Nope, I think you can separate it.
So the default budget.
Get it?
Yeah, Jack.
You know, this is difficult for me because, you know, there's a reason why we have 7 Supreme Court justices that write differences of opinions. And you did a very good job of articulating the law and how that CIP works, which was kind of how I was thinking. If we say with the tennis courts, if we don't move forward on those tennis courts, those funds, if say they would take it from the CIP, those funds would stay in the default budget automatically and we'd be having no discussion about that. Am I correct? And then you could argue that, well, all these things are enhancements of fields and courts, which we were gonna continue to do year over year over year. So I'm, on its face, it looks like these are one-time expenses, but when you dig into the actual meaning of the CIP and how it functions as a pool of money to do various tasks, it takes on a slightly different flavor. So I'm still struggling with this a little bit, because on its face, it seems to be one thing, and when you do a little bit deeper dive, it's something a little bit different. So I just wanted to say that there were all kinds of little shades of gray here, in my humble opinion. I know not everyone agrees with that, but that's how I feel.
That's why they call it practicing law.
Welcome to the default budget, because every year
Yep.
this is a discussion that,
Lived it in town, lived it here, yeah.
yeah, it's a constant discussion. There's always question, there's concern. It's trying to do it right. It's trying to interpret the law. There's a reason why there always become issues on this, because everyone interprets it differently. And that's where the question becomes, is what's the right thing? As Justin said, we reached out to counsel and asked his opinion because he's the one that's in charge of interpreting this. You know, it's up. Maria brings forth the numbers. She presents it the way she interprets it. Council supporting that. I mean, so there's got to be some justification there. And again, the gray thing, as you're talking about, becomes with when you read the statute, as Justin did. You know, yeah, it's a one-time expenditure. Like, we're not going to do tennis courts again, or we're not going to do the track again. However, when you look at where that came from, it's a pool of money that we've carried year to year to do projects, and we don't every year pull money out. So part of the gray comes when you read the statute and you read how it applies. It talks about the appropriation and the appropriation of the budget that was put forth to the voters. So what did we actually put forward to the voters last year that they voted on? And the tennis courts, it was an after the fact thing, so it wasn't something that the voters voted on, which becomes part of the thing. It was, they voted on the appropriation and the amounts that was set forth in that budget.
And is it fair?
They didn't vote on the if we had the tennis courts in the budget as a one-time thing that was voted on last March, it would definitely come out.
Yep.
There would be no question about it. And then that becomes the question. And then the track is the same. It came out of a certain line, but we've always carried that over and we've used that for certain projects. We just designated it for that project this year. So the question is, do we do something different this year that we haven't done in the past and say, pull that out because it was the track, but we've never pulled it out in years past. We've always carried it over from operating to default, regardless of what the use is. The key is right now is it can be earmarked for, oh, it was used for the track and there's a one-time. So that's where the gray comes from. So the question is, what do you do with the gray? So you're 100% correct that it's a lot of gray. What do you do? And that's why we went to council and said, how do you interpret this? Where do you go? And council's advising that the way that Maria presented the budget is the proper way to go forward.
And it's just one last thing.
Yeah, Joe.
It isn't even something like you could say, all right, we'll meet you halfway on, because it's either you believe this or you believe that, or
It's either or. There's
it's either
no-
or. There's no in
right.
between. And for me, it's about making sure we get it right.
And that's what we all want to do. And
Yeah.
that's,
Yep.
but the gray is there. And that's why.
Just to reaffirm, I think we all understand this is rather nebulous and the gray is there. This is a practice, if we followed it, that we would be following the precedent of year after year, of what we've been doing historically,
Correct. This is no change since at least 2020.
following precedent then, as Jack had stated. Cool.
Something unrelated, move from that topic to another line item here.
For the default budget?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely, go ahead.
I just want an understanding of the 605,000 difference, the variance under other professional services, and how that gets carried over as that increase. I don't know that I can.
Maria, did you understand or did you hear that question, I guess, first?
I thought we let her go.
Sorry, can you repeat, please? It's very hard to understand.
Okay, under other professional services, the 2025 default is $1,425,000, and the voted was 820. The variance is 605,000, and I just was wondering how it's possible to bring over, that much of a variance there. I mean, what is funded? What is automatically funded next year that's predicated on that difference?
I'm sorry, Don, it's very hard to understand you. I only understood that you're looking at contracted services.
Is that what it is? It's contracted services for special education?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were significantly had to spend a whole lot more. So next year, we were contracted to spend that much more again?
Yeah, so Kelly Brooks, actually Kelly's there, so she probably can chime in. But when Kelly Brooks provided her budget, she had an increase of $1 million of professional services. And the reason why is because we haven't been able to hire the personnel that we need to provide the special services that we're required to provide. So the rate of providing those services with contracted services is a lot higher. So since it's something that we have, those are services that we have to provide regardless of anything, we have to include it in the default budget.
Which is great.
Is that impacted by not hiring positions? And
Yes, it's because we can't find those people in-house.
so we anticipate not having those positions in the budget to accommodate that?
So the positions are still in the budget. This is on top of the positions because the rate for contracted services is double. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but sometimes almost triple the rate that if we have an employee, right?
Right, yes.
So depending on the service, the rates are double or sometimes almost triple the rate that we will pay an employee.
That's a staggering figure. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions about the default budget?
I have a
Yep, Kim.
question. The only other big increase I saw that made me do a double take was in the athletics, there was a $44,000 increase in game expenses. Is that
It has to
referee?
do with the change in law of funding referees primarily. So again, contractual increase, just to have folks do the games.
Wow. Thank you.
Any other questions about the default budget? Okay, so we do have to take action on this tonight. We've heard all the arguments, the gray, speaking with counsel and legal, and then Maria, the $89,835,373 for the default budget is what is the proposed default budget. Again, legal has looked at it. Did you want to say something?
I do.
Okay.
And I don't know procedurally how or if or what we can do or what this board's position is, but Sheila obviously came in. Hi, Sheila. And I'm sure Sheila is here to speak something about the default budget, I'm going to assume.
Yes, but it's not about one-time expenditures.
Okay, so.
How do you like that?
Okay, so I guess kind of my thing is this, that we've moved our thing to the end of the meeting, but if she has something to say, what I'd hate to do is vote on a default budget.
I just have questions.
Okay, but my point is, what I would hate to do is vote on a default budget and then have her ask a question or say something that we all go, oh. I mean, granted, we could always come back to it.
We could revisit.
We could revisit it, but part of me would like to hear what has to be said before, so just the will of the board, I'm just putting it out there.
I have a question.
Is it something that we can procedurally do to hear what has to be said, to see if it has any thought or impact on anything that we are
Vote on the
considering?
default budget tonight, and I probably should know this, but I just wanna
okay.
make sure. We go to the public hearing, and I know we can change our minds on what we support and what we don't support. Can we change the default budget after the public hearing when we go back in our rooms? And
I think we
don't believe so.
I don't know if that default budget is written in granite tonight.
I'm pretty sure we sign off on it and that becomes it, unless there's a reason to change it down the road. And because we've had to stick by it before, once it was put in, and that's what landed us in court, so.
Yeah.
So that's why,
Technically have it
that's the
for the
answer.
warrant needs to be posted.
Yeah.
Which is the last Monday in January.
to change the default.
To have a default that's posted for the community to consider.
They
that we
cannot
posted
change
for-
the default or deliberate.
No, the default can't be
You
changed
cannot
until
touch the default.
I said public hearing.
No, I understand, you just asked me a
yeah.
question.
Okay.
So once the public hearing's over, nobody can touch that default after that.
This is your meeting.
The meeting, right? Meeting following.
Hold on. So, we're on our default budget. Kristen asked a question. It is the will of the board. Do we want, I have moved the remaining minutes for delegates and individuals to the end. I'll remind that this is a meeting held in public. It is a meeting not for the public with participation. So
Sorry.
usually, whenever we have delegates come in and speak, they speak, but if they ask questions, we technically do not answer them. It's not a conversation piece back and forth. Stating that, now it's up to the will of the board on if you all want to wait and have delegates and individuals towards the end, or if you want to move it up before we vote on this, but it is the will of the board.
It is, and we can do it either way, I just,
That's
putting it out there just as a consideration beforehand. So.
Make a motion to move the delegates and individual session of the meeting to right now.
A motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Jack, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And abstained. All right, who was for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it passes. And then who abstained?
I abstained, sorry, I was kind of in between.
I said no.
I said no.
2 noes, 2 abstentions.
One thing, just want to clarify before we begin that. It's still treated like it was as if it happened after the meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, so whatever time is left
Just wanna make
over,
sure
it
we
has to
know
get
that.
moved again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
How's that?
Did you fill out a form sheet?
She did.
Okay.
I was writing it down. So my thing with this final default is that I believe when I watched the budget committee meeting on the 28th, they removed $1,000 million, I believe it was. And those lines were, because I know it went back and forth a few times, right? We had regular program transportation, which is a contracted service. We have special education transportation, that was a contracted service. We have ESY transportation, that's a contracted service. Athletics stayed in, I believe, if, I'm looking at you, Mark, because I'm trying to make sure I remember all this. There are 2 lines in special education private tuition. That's roughly $935,000. They went into a non-public, they came back out, and they were originally going to drop at that entire amount, but then they decided to put 500,000 back in that line. So that line, those 2 lines came down less than 500,000. Contracted service is tuition private. Capital improvement went back in. Half of the new positions got taken out, I believe. So I guess my question is why isn't the default reflecting what the voted operating budget is as far as, I believe it's up there, contracted services either decreased or increased. So if we no longer have those contracted services, if we're able to take them out of the operating budget, they should not be in the default. They should match. So that was my first little rat-a-tat. My second little thing, I'm not gonna get into the one-time expenses. I'm just not. As of right now, I don't know if any of you guys are aware of this, but you've got basically $2.8 million in surplus. How that happened was 750,000 of it was the overage amount in health trust, I believe, because we budgeted more than we actually needed. And the other part of that is the $2 million for the first payment on the lease, which we don't have a payment this year. So my first statement is, I don't understand why my music people over here haven't made a motion for $100,000 to get new band uniforms when you've got plenty of surplus. And we're in January. There's gonna be more coming. My second statement is, and I'm gonna say this with my whole chest, I believe that $2,061,000 should be returned to the taxpayers. It is not being used for the intent and purpose it was raised and appropriated for. It should immediately, that money should never be touched for surplus or anything else. As far as your tennis court, one of the right to knows I did has money coming out of that operating budget going into sites and building renovations. That's how you paid for the tennis courts. Just so you know, that's where the money came from. It came from salaries, it came from tuition private, because we're obviously doing great in district. for our special ed students. Because for the past 2 years, you've been able to transfer money out of tuition private into contracted services because that's where you need the money. But as far as I know, you did that already this year. You put in $588,000 and took it out of private tuition and put it into contract services because they needed it. Last year, they took out about $450,000 and put it into buildings. So that money is not being used. But my basic statement is, if we are not using contracted services and they were taken out of the operating budget, they should match in the default budget because we no longer have those services. We should not be carrying that money in the default. It should equal out. So this default should come down just about $1 million, just from that. Because of the decisions that BudCom made. That's it.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're gonna have to find legal or whatever on it, but I believe they need to match. Now I can go home.
Thank you, Sheila.
There was no coffee open either, I was very beside myself. Okay, guys, have fun.
Did I get a motion to move the last 14 minutes of delegates and individuals to the end of the meeting?
So moved.
Second. Second by Sean. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right. Is legal consultant.
Legal was consulted around default budget regarding changes to transportation and contracted services, and they are still in agreement that we are meeting the statute.
Which lines were, I'm gonna ask that we table the default so we can go over I wanna go over the budget before I vote on the default, because I wanna hear where these changes were made.
Okay.
Based on what I've just heard.
So you just want to wait and hear what we got?
I just wanna table
Yeah.
the default and taking action on the default while we go through the
Okay.
budget so that I can hear how the budget was determined, because I really can't vote on the default
fine.
without knowing how, because the default is based on last year's budget, but if we had a contractual number change drastically and we're saying it's going down in one budget, you can't justify that you have to hold, if it's contractual. And so I just wanna hear how the budget was set.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, right.
So we'll come back to the action on this one.
All right, so does Maria want to talk about the proposed budget then?
No, she doesn't, she wants to go to bed.
So last week, we met with the budget committee. They reviewed the proposed budget again, and it was decided to add back the $500,000 for the capital improvement budget that they had taken in the prior meeting. And they also agreed to add $500,000 back for the out of district tuition for special education based on the fact that it's a new law that was supposed to go into effect in July 1st, but we have not received any funds or they have not picked up any of the tuition for these special education students that are out of district, placed out of district. So based on that, they made a decision to put back $500,000 into the operating budget into that account, which brought the proposed budget up $1 million. So the final proposed budget number is $89,370,265. That's a 2.7% increase, a total increase of $2,323,351. The largest drivers, again, like the default budget, are salaries and benefits. We have the increase in food service, the same as the default, the special education increase of the $500,000 for the tuition. We have the savings in utilities, professional services, $155,000. supplies 30,000, maintenance and repair 70,000, equipment 176,000, and info access fees 109,000. So as you can see, the difference between the two budgets this year is minimal, is less than $500,000 difference. As mentioned, for the $500,000 tuition, I think Justin, if I understand correctly, you said that it was already checked with legal and we had the legal advice for those two items, right?
Correct. Yep, we had a conference call with legal regarding the special education on district tuition and also some of the reductions in the transportation lines. We are absolutely honoring those contracts. It is simply a projection, and we're looking at kind of real cost over the years and making some adjustments to our usage for transportation. And specific to the special education, we received some legal guidance that this is a new law. They have a bit concern and some caution about how the funding mechanisms are going to work. And we're giving some advice to districts to kind of just slow the train a bit. If it's too good to be true, it very well may be, and you may want to just proceed with more caution. And BudCom made some decisions based upon that information.
Jack.
So question, so my understanding is the concern is that our contractual obligations in a certain specific area decreased in this year's budget via budget committee. And it seems like you already know what I'm gonna ask. And does our default budget reflect the decrease in that contractual obligation? Do those two things match up?
Yes, they do. I think the misunderstanding is looking at contractual services and thinking they're the same thing.
Okay.
Out-of-district tuition is different than a contracted service. They're two different pieces.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for the proposed budget? So the proposed budget is $89,370,265, correct? Mhm. But then our default budget is $89,835,373. So where's this $1 million increase?
Does anyone speak to what she was saying?
Is $465,108 difference between the two of them, between the two budgets.
So why are we delaying on the default?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Why are we delaying the default vote?
I just wanted to delay the default vote so we could talk about the budget, so I could just hear what Justin's explanation was, which explained why we have it in the default. So
Oh, so you're
I
not,
didn't want to vote on the default until Justin had the opportunity to explain what he just did.
thank you.
Because now I can confidently vote on the default budget, which I could not do without hearing Justin say what he said.
Maria, historically, what's been the difference between the default budget and the proposed budget?
You opened that can of worms.
It changes every year. Last year, let me see, I have it open over here.
And we have a chart because we did this last year.
Some years they're very far apart and some years they're very close. It just depends what is at stake and what are the contractual rates for the different contracts that we have. Those are primarily the reasons why. Last year was $1.9 million difference. And most of it was because we added $1 million to the capital budget. So the default budget didn't have the $1 million that we added to the proposed budget.
So let me tell you, in 21 and 22, the default budget was higher than the proposed budget by a difference of 550,000 and 650,000 in those years. In 2020, 2019, and 2018, the default budget was less than the proposed budget by values of 378, 733, and 929,000. Then we had 3 years, 2017, 16, and 15. Once again, the default budget was higher than the proposed by 230,000, 775,000, and 436,000. 2014, we went the other way again, where the default budget was lower than the proposed budget by 478,000. 2013 was an anomaly, but the default budget was slightly lower than the proposed budget by only $3,000. So they were pretty close. 2012, again, default was lower by 252,000. 2010, 2011, default was higher. So you can't,
There's so many different
there's so many
drivers.
different variations, there's so many everything. I mean, this is not
No, but usually.
out of the realm of normalcy for.
No, but usually the default and the proposed budget, there's not much of a difference between them. There might be a little bit, but there's not much. And I
It
know at the
just-
school,
yeah.
it varies, but just for the people who are listening, there is only a $465,108 difference between the default budget and the proposed budget, with the proposed budget being that much less than the default. We've heard legal, we've heard the arguments. For me, I'm good with voting on the default budget tonight, but it's the will of the board.
Oh, I'm good with the voting on it tonight as well. I mean, I think we need to go, we've kind of kicked this can down the road, waiting for the budget to be set and for all these numbers, and I think we've done our due diligence at this point. We've heard concerns from multiple people, and we've, you know, as we talked about, it's the gray, which ironically, I look around the table and know a whole bunch of us wearing a gray tonight, so that's kind of, but it's just that thing that it's the gray, but we reached out to legal, we've exhausted these things, we've gone back and forth. And I have to be confident that what we have, I mean, I understand it's such a confusing subject. That's why it always generates so much conversation, and I understand why people have different opinions. I could argue it either way. I mean, that's as lawyers, that's what we do. I can take this argument and I can go either way, and I can go either way with it. Relying on the advice of counsel and everyone that spent countless hours looking at this and determined that this is the proper budget.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could kind of go either way on this because of those shades of gray. But one exercise I'd like to see maybe for the next meeting, if the administration could do it, is what the actual impact is relative to inflation. In other words, what are we buying? What's the difference in price for paper, anticipated for next year or for this year? In other words, you look at that default budget, what it doesn't take into consideration when you say they're close is inflation.
Right.
What is going to cost us more that we're paid that isn't incorporated, huh?
Everything.
Well, that's my point, but I think you could get some key indicators, some common stuff and say, okay, we're being impacted 7% more that may be reflected in the operating budget that isn't reflected in the default. So it's one thing I think we kind of fail to realize when we start looking at this stuff. So anyways, that's it. I'm ready to go.
I guess here's the thing, I mean, and I'm just, what was the number you said was the difference?
$465,108.
I mean, again, vote for the proposed budget. I mean, you vote for the proposed budget, it's the lower number. Default only comes into play if the proposed doesn't pass. And even if we were to say, take the tennis courts and the track out, we're still right at that number's right in the same point. I mean, Justin, you said the confusion becomes with the contracted services versus, so when you look at that, even with that, if that were not the case and you went, unfortunately, we're not talking a large impact. It's an impact, trust me, we all pay taxes, it's tough, I don't wanna do it either. But when you weigh it all out, it's not gonna change much.
And I believe
So-
we have thoroughly kicked this horse, so does someone want to make a motion to approve the default budget for FY 2025 for $89,835,373?
So moved.
A motion by Kim, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dawn, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed and abstained, alright, cool. Does anybody have any other questions for the proposed budget while Maria is still on the phone? Okay. Thank you, Maria. Feel better, Maria.
I will. Thank you so much, guys.
Take care.
Just so you know, I'm gonna send you the historic, the full-time proposed budget and the voting rates, so you guys can have it and can look at it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. All right, last article of business is the draft warrant articles. This is the 6th presentation of these. When is the day that we have to vote, Justin?
So what I think we were scheduled is after the public hearing on the 11th.
Okay.
We have a school board meeting posted that you folks will get together and you'll have a recorded vote for each of the warrants. And that will be the tally that's recorded on the final preparations of the warrant for voters.
That's also the same day that we sign them, correct?
You could wait to sign them, which I would recommend you do until the 18th.
Okay.
And then we will post on the 19th, which is well in advance of the last Monday in January.
Any of the warrant articles changed other than the amount was put into the operating budget?
Yeah, the amount was put there. Jim did a little small language revisions to the TAM agreement because he'll be in attendance and just wanted to speak to that. We had the attorney who led the negotiations write that. Nothing substantial, just in terms of preference language changes, but nothing significant for you to look at versus reading number 5.
Okay. And there are currently 9 of these articles. Does anybody have any questions for the warrant article at this time? Again, we'll vote on them after the public hearing. All right, administrator's report.
Cool. I'm not going to bore people more with default stuff, but one thing on the business and facility side of things is we still have those open RFPs that have already been kind of presented through the board through the admin report. They're closing shortly. We now have a 4th one that's out there. This is for paving. It just opened and it was shared with Busby and Stikeman. WP Davis also posted to the website, included in the Dodge report and the construction summary as well. And that RFP will close sometime in March. So we'll keep you updated about where we are in the bidding process for those pieces. And when we've got some recommendations, we will bring them back to the board.
Just a welcome back to everyone. Hope that everyone had a relaxing, restful break during the holiday season. Justin and I, in the past few days, we've had an opportunity to meet with both our secondary and elementary principals and directors of education and special education coordinators, kind of talk about where we're at, set some goals for the spring. Leading up to the break, also just kind of giving you advance information on what's coming your way for the next board meeting. We've been meeting and digging into our state assessment results from last spring. So I've been meeting with building teams, looking at all of those results, having some pretty in-depth conversations about things that we're seeing and setting some action steps. We'll be looking at that data this coming Tuesday at the Curriculum Assessment Committee. And we're projecting to bring you, as a board, also those results that you'll be seeing at our next board meeting. So that will be coming your way.
Thank you. Vacancy report, we do not have one, and Fran is not here. Nothing has changed. Committee reports, start with Jack.
No, nothing other than we may have a cheaper, low-cost alternative to some of the masonry issues that we have. I'm gonna have a meeting tomorrow on that, and so anyways, that's kind of cool. I do have 2 questions. There was a law, I think, that was proposed or in place about if students hadn't applied for FAFSA, whether they were going on to college or not, they couldn't receive their diplomas on graduation day. We talked about that kind of when we first all got together as a board. And I don't know if anything has changed there, but again, I would hate to see us scrambling on graduation day.
Our high school counseling department has been
Okay.
on top of that.
All right,
so
cool,
yes.
all right. And the only other thing I have is I hope that anything that we want to do, whether it be cabinets in the high school and middle school, anything that potentially we would like to get done, we have budget numbers and have gone out to bid before the end of the year, so we don't find ourselves kind of where we were with only looking at one thing for the tennis courts. It seems like we're kind of going down that road, but I just want to reiterate that I think we should have everything we possibly can available on the table for this board to make a decision quickly. And I would really kind of want to move. I don't know if it's premature for me, but I would love to move on these band uniforms. I don't know if that's the flavor of the board or if that's speaking out of turn, but I feel strongly like if there's a group that deserves this, It's them.
Well,
What's Madam Chair?
Mr. Schweiss has been talking quite a bit, and I think has a path that he wants to pursue, and so we're gonna support that, whatever that is that gets brought before us. So, Dawn,
All set.
Kristen?
No, nothing, facilities and safety next week. So nothing,
Next week on
nothing
Tuesday.
new to report. Oh, so, but this isn't a committee report, but I do wanna say this, so shame on me, cause I've never been to one of these events before, but I went to my first unified basketball game at the high school, and oh my goodness, if you wanna go to a feel-good event and just watch something, pure joy, pure kids having fun, and just, it was the most amazing event I've been to. Kudos to everyone that puts it on. Helena Bird is the coach. The Pinkerton kids were saying to some of our players, how come you have so many people on your team? Because clearly we have a lot of kids that will volunteer, but they all want to work with each other and with Helena and put this on, and it was just an absolutely amazing event. We don't have another home game for a couple of weeks. There are 2 more at the end of January, February. I will send you all the dates, because if you have the ability to go to one of these, not just the school board, anyone in this district, anyone in this community, talk about kids doing good things with other kids and people doing good things, and just what an atmosphere. And they put up 60 points, our home team did, which was pretty darn good to score 60 points, because no offense to the varsity teams, I'm not sure they always score that in their game. So just what an event. So that's all. I cannot say enough about that. I had so much fun.
I have nothing. Safety will meet next week. Policy met today, so we'll be moving forward with, I think, 2 policies are coming forward to the board at our next meeting. And then Wellness Committee meets on Wednesday, January 10th at 4 p.m.
Talk about BudCon, but I think we already have. You have all the updates.
Kim?
Curriculum and assessment meets next Tuesday, so that's it.
Bree?
Strategic planning met. We have 4 subcategories: learning, personnel, community, and facilities. Learning is working on developmental days for staff around best K-12 instructional practices. The personnel we had the job fair, highlighted that opportunity. Community subcommittee is reminding individuals about different ways to reach out to the community, and they're always looking for expansion of those connections. And the facilities subcommittee is going to be utilizing a thought exchange as a platform to gather input regarding learning environments for stakeholders for the building. And our next meeting is Thursday, January 18th.
Paul?
As was said, we have our curriculum and assessment next week, and then is there a construction meeting scheduled?
We're going to schedule one, and I was a little bit
Remiss.
we've been talking, remiss, thank you. We're gonna be scheduling a CIP committee meeting to discuss the better coordination between the construction committee
Okay.
and the CIP stuff, so we can stop managing that in a more concise way.
I thought you all
So-
already had a construction committee set for sometime this month, because you were gonna get information about the windows.
My understanding is that the details on the windows are complete. I'm waiting to receive them, and we have not scheduled a construction meeting yet.
Carl?
24th, 9 a.m.
Well,
That's the
obviously,
construction?
when was it?
January 24th, 9 a.m. That was the original one, which we called the emergency one.
Oh, okay, so there was one already scheduled.
Yeah.
Okay, cause we were talking
That's
about
still scheduled?
potentially moving that up, but that's fine. I
Thank you,
was
Carl.
thinking about a new one.
Paul, did you have anything else?
That's it, thanks.
Any other business?
I would
Yeah, Bree, go ahead.
to ask about the financial analyst position. I know we were working on.
Talking with Katie and Kristen, I think that we are looking to schedule a presentation to you folks on the 18th of January.
Thank you.
Any other business? Do we have any more delegates or individuals?
No, there is not.
All right. We do not have a non-public session, so I'm gonna call this meeting at 9:10. Everybody have a good evening.
To me.